Hello, my name is Flippin' Marx. You are watching the Kayfabe News RAW review, and my word, we are living in crazy times. I mean, not only are we suffering through this global pandemic at the moment, but somehow we are about to see the greatest wrestling match of our time. Think of this, the greatest wrestling match that the sport of professional wrestling has ever seen. If you were born in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, or the 2020s, get rid of some of them because obviously you're born, you'll see. Anyway, so many people have been born and died never being able to say they saw the greatest wrestling match ever. But as WWE informed us last night, at the Backlash pay-per-view that takes place in a few weeks, it will be Edge, the returning Edge, taking on Randy Orton in, yes, the greatest wrestling match of our lives. This, of course, led me to think about other contenders for the throne before Randy Orton versus Edge came along, and I thought I'd share a few with you right now. Up first, of course, from Extreme Rules 2014 is the WLC match, which still boggles my mind to this day because WWE was able to find a leprechaun and a bull and somehow get some kind of sporting commission to sign off on that. And again, they fought in a tables, ladders, and chair match. I'm surprised that Peter didn't ring up the organization or the RSPCA because you had, a lucky Irish mascot just wailing on an animal, and where I come from, that's not cool. Next up, we go back to WrestleMania 28 and 29, which I will never get over as long as I breathe oxygen into my lungs. Of course, at WrestleMania 28, we had once in a lifetime John Cena versus The Rock, but we were so fortunate a year later to get twice in a lifetime, even though they told us it was only going to happen once in a lifetime. And obviously, The Rock won the first match, then John Cena won the second match and also became the WWE champion. There's no two ways about it. That was indeed the greatest wrestling match I'd ever seen because it just blew, well, my head stayed on my head. It blew the hair off my head. And now in 2020, it's going to be trumped. We also have to mention SummerSlam 1994, where The Undertaker took on himself. Undertaker versus Undertaker, and we never really understood where this second dead man came from. I suppose when you are a zombie, you are going to have some kind of powers that are able to clone yourself, I suppose, or become a zombie and climb out of the ground. But I mean, it's 1994, so it's been a good 26 years. And I never know. I've never been told how this happened. It truly was amazing. And finally, of course, we go back to 2019 when WWE headed to Saudi Arabia, where we got our dream match, Bill Goldberg versus The Undertaker. I mean, did you see the damage that those two did to each other in that scrap? It was a war for the ages, and I feel privileged to have been a part of it. But all of them can now take a back seat to Edge versus Randy Orton, the greatest match of all time. Elsewhere on Raw, we also do need to talk about the Viking Raiders and the Street Profits, who decided to engage in a little bit of axe throwing. Now, this did throw me off my game to start with, because I thought I was tuning in to, like I say, a professional wrestling television broadcast until I made sense of it. I mean, what is one of the most devastating moves in wrestling that we haven't seen in some time? The double axe handle. What does an axe have? It has a handle. So this was clearly Montez Ford, Dawkins, Ivar, and Eric training up to hopefully hit some of those amazing aerial maneuvers down the line. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, because it is a move that hasn't been around for a while, the double axe handle is when a professional wrestler climbs up to the top rope, they clasp their hands together like this, as if it's an axe handle, they jump off and they twonk their opponent right on the head. And this is why learning how to throw an axe properly is only going to better your form, because for starters, when you hold an axe, you can work on your forearms, which you need when you do indeed clasp your hands together. And if you can throw an axe into the target, well, look at this motion. That's exactly what you do when you crack it into somebody else's skull. I look a bit like I've broken, or, the frame rate's gone weird, but I'm just giving it to you like it is. I also find it fascinating that not only are we here in the modern day, 2020, but the WWE was able to uncover two real-life Vikings from the medieval period, or the Viking-esque period, where, of course, they would have lived, and then found out they were also talented professional wrestlers. And here we were seeing their clan, we were seeing their camp. They lit a fire out of respect for the Street Profits, and it was rather intimidating. Of course, eventually the authorities were alerted, because you can't just throw axes around willy-nilly and expect police officers not to care. And worse off here, a stray axe had gone through the windscreen of a cop car, and that's why they turned up. And being the shrewd members of the police force that they were, they made Dawkins, Montez Ford, and the Viking Raiders throw an axe into the target, knowing that whoever managed to hit a bullseye was clearly responsible for this, or the other way around at least, because they sucked. And then hopefully the lady police officer that was here will be struck off from the force because she allowed all 4 men to get away with this simply because she found Ivar of the Viking Raiders to be attractive. I mean, the fact that she would dare do this to begin with, but also do it on a camera, makes you wonder what else is going on behind the scenes. This was political madness. We also saw the rise of one relationship and a fall of another, as it does seem like the love affair between Bobby Lashley and Lana is coming to an end. She was stinking up a fit here once she learned that Bobby Lashley had decided to take on the managerial services of MVP. And while I'm very worried about that, you remember the beautiful wedding they had only a few months ago? I myself have been involved in marriages that barely lasted a day, and it scars you, I tell you. It scars you deep. However, MVP is clearly one of the greatest managers to ever live, because despite only getting together around about 1 hour into last night's Raw, when we got to the main event, which was Baron Corbin and Drew McIntyre, which Drew McIntyre was able to get away with. We were a bit worried he was going to get beheaded by the King, but he managed to get round that. Well, Bobby Lashley and MVP came out and they challenged Drew McIntyre for a championship match at Backlash, and it certainly seems like that's the case. Now, we do have to go back to what we talked about last week. I'm very worried that police officers are more focused on these axe-throwing shenanigans than they are on what's happening on Raw. Because when Bobby Lashley put a microphone in his hands and spoke into it, he said that when all is said and done, he will pry the WWE title from Drew McIntyre's cold and dead hands. So please tell me, dear reader, why is nobody prosecuting Baron Corbin for trying to kill Aleister Black and Rey Mysterio? Why is nobody prosecuting The Undertaker for trying to kill AJ Styles? And why is Bobby Lashley allowed to come out here and make such threats? If I look down this camera lens now and stare deep into your eyes and say, "Watch your ass, pal, I'm coming round your house with a stabby knife, and I'll slam it into your face," you would likely ring the police. For the record, I'm not saying that. I'm just giving it to you as an example. But we can all look forward to that in MVP if you are watching. I certainly would like to have a discussion with you about maybe you taking on my career so I can leave behind this dirt-ridden piece of trash. Speaking of managers, I would also like to run you down my favorite 10 managers in WWE history. At number 10, we have Mama Benjamin, who you remembered was brought in to take care of his son after Shelton was struggling. Number 9 is Babu, who used to accompany Tiger Ali Singh to the ring, and he was so dedicated. And he was so passionate about what he did. Not only did he take insults, not only did he take violence, but he'd even kiss Tiger Ali Singh's feet, if that's what he wanted. Number 9 is the coach, who of course was responsible for Mr. Perfect's rise to fame. I really enjoyed it when he blew that whistle over and over and over and over and over again. Number 7 is Nicole Bass. Remember her? She was jacked. Number 6 is the genius who took control of the Beverly Brothers, because his name sums it up. He was a genius. 5 goes to Tamina, because nobody's meaner, who of course once managed the Usos. And what have they done since they dumped her? Nothing. Number 4 goes to Mini Boogeyman, because somehow the Boogeyman, who's quite a scary figure, was able to find a miniature version of himself. He could have been in WLC. Number 3 is Sapphire, because what would Dusty Rhodes have been without her? Number 2 is Mr. Fuji, because he always had a backup plan, usually involving some salt. And number 1 would be the anonymous general manager from Raw. It's that damn leprechaun again. How the hell was he able to get so much power? We also next week get to see Andrade versus the now back Apollo Crews. He obviously suffered that terrible knee injury a few weeks ago, but he's back and he looks better than ever. And I just want to say that I'm very, very excited about that. Apollo, to me, has always seemed to have this fire beneath him, but it was never used properly, and now finally he can kick the crap out of Andrade and maybe win his first championship on the main roster, because of course he was down in NXT, but only for a hiccup. And that is that. I've been Flippin' Marx. That was the Kayfabe News Raw review, and once again I just want to say how happy I am that we are all on the verge of witnessing the greatest wrestling match of all time. Forget Ric Flair, forget Ricky Steamboat, forget Shawn Michaels, forget Bret the Hitman Hart, forget all of those. They will pale in comparison to this. My groin is tingling.